So instead I've sort of try and stay vaguely anatomical and deal with 3 sweeps, an upper GI sweep, a small bowel sweep, and then a sweep around the colon. Now, most of the probe positions are just adjustments of your fast scanning, because you actually have to get round the side to see underneath the gas. However, we'll have to do some anatomy, because it's quite important to understand how the bowel folds in and over and around if you want to recognise it. So we'll start with the stomach. It's a bit like a sock. And all we're really looking at in basic level is it full or not? If you imagine that the toe of the sock is like the fundus of the stomach, just under the diaphragm, and the foot, where your foot goes, is the pylorus. And we catch that under the edge of the liver anteriorly. Now, there's certainly been a quite naturalistic, simple study on this, which didn't come up with terribly good... Oh no, hang on, this is the anaesthetists. Now, anaesthetists are very much into this. Sorry, they've been looking at this for a little while. There's a good website called www.gastricultrasound.com. And they have these nice fancy modelling and have a good formula that you plug your pyloric CSA into, and you can get an estimate of the volume of the stomach. However, if you like to do that, that's cool. In the emergency department, I'm just at the stage of wanting to know if it's full or not. Now then I want you to imagine the small intestine like my pair of stockings. The duodenum at the first, second, third parts are very deep and somewhat retroperitoneal, and so they're hard to see. But then you get this nice concertinaed folds across here. They're much more easier to get a hold of. And then the small intestine tracks across suprapubitically to the right iliac fossa with the terminal ileum. I can handle that. This is the naturalistic review. It didn't have terribly good test characteristics, but then again, for picking small bowel obstruction, then again, they didn't have very much training time. Now, finally, the large bowel is like head stockings. And we're taught that the ascending colon and the descending colon are tethered to the back wall. They lied. How else would you get cecal volvulus if it was all tethered? What's more, the transverse colon and the sigmoid colon can be quite redundant and hang down and get in the road. So it can be quite challenging. Now, really important to understand this left upper quadrant here, because it's a very important anatomical position. Remember that we have the transition between the superior mesenteric artery and the inferior mesenteric artery about here. So you really want to know what's going on here. But you need to know if the bit you're looking at there is large bowel, small bowel, or stomach, because all the loops converge there. So the trick is with the left upper quadrant, obviously, if you're scanning from the side, like this, you'll see my TED stocking superficial. If you're scanning from the front, you'll see the brown stockings in front. Remember that when we actually get to do it. So, as I'm pledged never to add another acronym to the world, I want you to think in terms of this picture. Think of the stomach as a short sweep that goes from deep to superficial. Think of the small bowel, and again, we're just sampling. We're not looking at the whole thing. I track in left upper quadrant, left loin, suprapubic, right iliac fossa. And then I just sort of take samples of round the colon bits that look interesting. 2 pictures, that's, as you know from your fast scanning, what the normal left upper quadrant looks like. And if you fan just a little bit anteriorly from that first position and see something like this, this is what a very full stomach looks like. A lot of people will call this free fluid at some stage in their life, and it's not. That's scary. That sort of means I'm not going to do procedural sedation in the ED. And when we look at the pylorus pushing firmly, the anaesthetist measure around here, not that bit, that's the transverse colon, but this bit here for their surface area. Now, if you see something like this, all the little bubbles in the fluid, you think to yourself, maybe nasogastric. So, when we start our second sweep from the small intestine, what you're looking for is continually moving peristalsing, bowel, you can't see a leading edge. It shouldn't be more than 2.5 centimetres in diameter. And as it tracks across to the right iliac fossa, maybe gets a little less active. We estimate the number of peristaltic motions in a minute to be about 3 per minute would be normal. And it looks like this writhing, twisting thing. I normally take about 3 samples. Now, if you saw something like this, one on this side, where you can actually see the wall, it's thick and shaggy. You can actually see there appears to be fluid in the middle, it's dark, and you can see the fat around it is bright. That's a concern for an enteritis or possibly even a reperfusion injury. Here, on the other hand, we have still bowel. Still bowel is always scary, but thin wall, dilated, little bit of fluid between. This one on the right is scary for obstruction or even arterial ischemia. So then we go tracking around the colon. Now, I warn you, the gastroenterologists term the colon the same terminology as they do with their endoscopies, colonoscopies. So to them, this is proximal colon, if you happen to read into gastroenterologist things. Anyway, I just try and look at the leading edge, because colon's usually got gas in it. And if the leading edge is crumpled and small, that's fine. If the leading edge is stretched tight, it's more of a worry. And when you get down to the rectum, this is the last known fixed bit of bowel, so it's easier to find. Looking through the bladder, through whatever that bit might be, whether it's cervix or vagina, and this area back here is where we look for the rectum. And if it's indistinct, that is good. But if you see something sharp, white and convex, you get worried. So just a couple of examples of abnormal large bowel. This one is dilated to probably 7 centimetres. It's a picture we have to get from the side. That's your classic obstruction picture. On the right, we have the opposite. We have really thick walls with a very thin, narrow strip of serosa or mucosa and feces in it. This one on the right is far more likely to be either ischemic colitis, which is what the diagnosis was in this case, or infectious colitis. On the left hand, we have your classic picture of diverticulitis, where the outer dark layer becomes prominent. Anyone who was at the gut station yesterday would have heard that you see a dark ring anywhere other than the pylorus, you've got to go and have another look at it. In this particular one, we're lucky because you can actually see the little diverticulum protruding down into the fat, and the fat is bright. Bright fat like that, as I said with appendix, is like fat stranding. Here on the other side, this is your classic pseudo-kidney of your ileocolic intussusception. More pictures of that at the stations. And finally, don't neglect the transvesical rectal view. This is, you don't have to do any more PRs anymore. This is good news. On the far left, we've got you see that convex upward bright curve? That's a small, narrow rectum on the far left. The little child who was passing little goat pebbles of poo. On this right-hand side, we've got that large indistinct arc across here, but certainly quite wide. That's 6 centimetres across here. That's a very distended rectum. I'm not promising it's constipation. It could simply be an atonic valve. But one thing I can say is you'll see further up the rectum than your finger will reach. And finally, the one in the middle is actually bad news. That's a stenosing rectal carcinoma. So for all it seems like the unimportant end of your lovely, impressive gut scan, please don't neglect that final picture because it can tell you a lot of information. Now, it's not just about putting the probe on and figuring out the diagnosis. This is just the equivalent of looking for tinkling bowel, or listening for tinkling bowel sounds, listening for a succussion splash, shifting dullness, and tenderness. That's really all we're doing. We are extending our physical exam at this level. And you think in your head, what processes am I seeing? Am I seeing free gas? You look for that up in that top view where you're looking at the pylorus. You ask yourself, am I seeing free fluid? Am I seeing peristalsis? That's a sign of health in general. Am I seeing dilation? Am I seeing inflammation of the bowel wall or inflammation of the mesentery around it? And vascularity. Vascularity is a bit hard. I have to tell you that we're still working on vascularity, but it doesn't stop me trying. But that's not enough. Again, it's like lung ultrasound. You then have to map the distribution of the processes. So you figure out what processes, things are going on, and then you put them in your head on a map. Is there a transition point, rapid one, or is it slowly changing? Do we have inflammation that's spreading maximally in one region, like appendicitis? Or do we have a pattern that's patchy and discontiguous? And that's where you put your brain in. You still have to be a doctor at this stage and figure out what you think is going on. Now, these are the only numbers I need you to remember at this stage. And that is the gut wall, other than the stomach, should be no thicker than 3 millimetres, which means that you generally can't see it with the curved abdominal probe. The stomach's a bit hard to measure because of all the rugae, so I'll sort of leave that in the too hard box at this stage. The second thing to remember is that large bowel has lots of gas and not much movement. In general, a peristaltic wave after a meal progresses at 25 centimetres per minute. So if you see a dark round hole in a bit of bowel, you just go back a minute later and see if it's still there. And finally, we have a sort of a fairly easy rule to remember, 369. This is insensitive, but it's easy to remember. And that is that if the small bowel is dilated more than 3 centimetres, if the large bowel is dilated more than 6 centimetres, or the cecum is dilated more than 9 centimetres, we probably have obstruction or ileus. Now, the obstruction ileus is not a very clear distinction, and that, again, that's probably level 2 gut scanning. I don't want to go into it right now. Now, in the last couple of minutes, I want to show you what we can see. Show you that really, if you do even basic gut scanning, you can duke it out with the simple CT scans. This is a middle-aged man with 24 hours of severe colicky pain. He's a little bit vague. He's got a history of what he thought might have been lactose intolerance. He thinks he might have an autoimmune disease. He's seeing a rheumatologist at Ipswich. We don't have gastroenterologists, but we do have a rheumatologist. He knows he's got diverticular disease, and he has been passing a little bit of blood lately. So, just starting right from the beginning, when I'm trying to find the pylorus, I see this instead. Free gas over the liver. Now, I do hear people talk about exaggerated peritoneal stripe sign, which is how you're supposed to see free air in the gut, and I find that very hard. I like to roll the patient around until the liver's highest and see if there's any air sitting over the liver here. I think it's more reliable. Process number 1. So, starting to have a look at his small bowel, sweep number 2. Right up in the left iliac fossa, sort of behind near that kidney, I can see something already that looks a little bit unusual. It's not that writhing small bowel that we saw before. This here will be a little bit of gas in the colon deep. As we measure the wall, the fact that I can actually see a dark ring around it has the spider sense already up a little bit. As we move further down, left iliac fossa, it appears to be starting to get worse. We can see that there's a lot of dark fluid. It's not moving along very well. We can see the plicae circularis, which also have other names like valvular convergentes and keyboard signs. This is getting worrying. As we move even further down, things are getting more worrying. We've got this loop of small bowel here. We also have flashing in and out of the picture this, which is, again, your typical sign of diverticular inflammation, where we have the really dark wall around a bit of sort of small concentrated feces. And we move further down and, it's really looking very bad right now. This is on the right-hand side, we have your piano keyboard sign. And up here, it really starts to look as if the bowel wall is starting to get thick. Got to keep count of these processes, by the way. You might not have noticed, but in the previous picture, there was a big dark hole. In fact, there was a couple of big dark holes. Lymph nodes. Keep that in mind. Drifting across the right iliac fossa. This is terminal ileum. It does not look like normal terminal ileum. It's got thick walls, it's got a very thin strip of endothelium serosa in the middle, and again it's outlined by bright fat. I must admit I was getting a bit worried by this point in time, and I haven't saved all the bowel pictures, but little bits of large bowel look really quite abnormal. I think this bit here is a pocket of free fluid sitting above the bladder. So tell me, what processes did we see? Free gas? Yeah. Free fluid? I think so. Obstruction or ileus? I'm not going to differentiate between the two. Yeah, something to the small bowel. Inflammation inside the bowel wall? Yeah. Inflammation outside the bowel wall? There was bright fat, yeah. Acute or chronic? We've got the acute perforation, we've got the chronic lymph nodes. So I've only saved a couple of these pictures for you, but you can see that in fact the CT didn't actually show us a great deal more. It shows us the free gas here. We're starting to see the thickened wall of ileum. We can see the loops of small bowel. We can see the fat stranding and the thickened wall here. Tiny bits of diverticular gas perhaps. And here on the right is the large lymph node. Now, I don't think I added a great deal to this man's acute care. He was always going for a CT. He had, of course, a perforated diverticulum. He went to theatre. I did write several copious notes about the terminal ileum, not looking terribly well. I followed his case for a couple of years. Because we don't have gastroenterology in Ipswich, we never really nailed his gut problem, but he's converted to a Hodgkin's lymphoma now on the basis of these lymph nodes, which were obvious on the CT scan 2 years before. As I said, working in the colonies is an experience. We need to follow up our cases. Now, in summary, look for the processes but then map them and try and figure out slow or fast transition, regional, patchy or contiguous. And if you're really interested, please look up this summative article by the World Journal of Gastroenterology. But honestly, I'm a big fan of Taylor, the fellow who first started gut scanning in 1986 in the Netherlands. And even in 2001, he is spot on the money with what he says. Thank you. Any questions?